There is someone in your life right now, and you cannot stop thinking about them. Not because you want to, not because it feels good, but because something beneath your conscious mind, something older and more powerful than your will, has wrapped itself around this person and refuses to let go. And the most terrifying part? You didn't choose this. You think you did. You think emotions are something you select, something you decide to feel, like picking an outfit in the morning. But what's actually happening inside you is something far more ancient, far more involuntary, and far more psychologically devastating than anything your rational mind has ever been prepared to handle. Here is the brutal truth that most people spend their entire lives running from. You are not in control of who you are emotionally bonded to. Your subconscious mind chose them long before you did. Think about that for a second. Before you ever said their name out loud, before you ever admitted to yourself what you felt, before you ever consciously acknowledged that this person mattered, some part of you, deep in the architecture of your psyche, had already made the decision, had already reached out, invisible and trembling, and attached itself to them like a root seeking water underground. But here's the truth that makes this even more disturbing. The people we become most deeply bonded to are never random. The subconscious does not throw darts blindfolded. It selects with terrifying precision. It finds the exact person who matches the emotional blueprint it has been secretly carrying since childhood. The blueprint built from every wound you were never allowed to name, every need that was never fully met, every love that came with conditions attached. And this is where it gets dangerous, because the bond is not just emotional, it is psychological. It lives in your nervous system. It lives in the way your breath changes when you hear their name. It lives in the dreams that wake you at 3 a.m., the ones you immediately tell yourself meant nothing. It lives in the way a certain song destroys you, and you can never quite explain why, but it does, every single time. Most people don't see this. Most people look at this attachment and call it love, or obsession, or trauma. And then they try to categorize it, label it, file it away somewhere clean and manageable. But what if it is none of those things? What if this bond is something older, something that the human mind has been constructing and reconstructing across centuries, quietly, in the dark? This invisible architecture of need and recognition that pulls two people toward each other, not because they are good for each other, but because they are necessary to each other in ways that terrify them both. There is a force operating beneath your awareness right now, and it has already decided. The subconscious mind does not ask your permission, it does not send you a notification, it does not wait for the right moment or the right circumstances. It simply moves, it simply acts. And by the time you become conscious of what has happened, by the time you feel the pull, the bond is already old. It has been forming in the dark for longer than you know. And here's what nobody is willing to say out loud. The strength of an emotional bond is not measured by how much joy someone brings you. It is measured by how much internal space they occupy when they are gone. Think about the person in your mind right now, not the one you're supposed to think about, the real one, the one you've been trying not to think about since the moment this started. How much room do they take up inside you? Because here is what that space actually tells you, not about them but about you, about the part of you that recognized something in them, about the wound that their presence opened up like a key turning in an old, rusted lock. And this is where it gets truly uncomfortable, because that recognition, that magnetic, inexplicable feeling that you have known this person forever, that is not magic. That is not fate in the romantic, cinematic sense. That is your subconscious projecting its own architecture onto another human being and saying, you, it's you. You are the one who carries what I have been searching for. But what exactly is it searching for? The answer to that question is not comfortable. It is not clean. And if you let yourself actually sit with it, it will show you something about yourself that you have been meticulously avoiding. You have been avoiding it for years. And this person, this one specific person who occupies too much space in your mind, is the door you keep walking past. The door you keep telling yourself you'll open someday. The door that, every time you get close to it, sends a cold shock through your chest that you immediately misname as anxiety or confusion or simply not being ready. But here is the thing about that door. You are not afraid of them. You are afraid of what you would have to admit about yourself if you truly understood why they affect you the way they do. The subconscious speaks in symbols, in feelings, in the language of the body. It does not give you a clean, logical explanation. It gives you a pulling sensation in the chest. It gives you the inability to stay fully present in any room that does not contain them. It gives you a kind of hollow ache when they disappear, an ache that no amount of logic, no amount of self-talk, no amount of distraction can fully fill. And most people, when they feel that ache, do one of two things. They run toward it without understanding it and get consumed, or they run away from it without examining it and carry it forever. Neither path leads anywhere real, because the bond is not the problem. The bond is the symptom. And the question, the one that will either set you free or swallow you whole, is this. What exactly is the wound that made this person feel like the answer? There is something inside you that has been hungry for a very long time. Not hungry in the simple surface-level way, not hungry the way a body needs food or sleep. Hungry in the psychological sense, in the deep, structural sense, the way a human being becomes hungry when something essential was withheld at exactly the moment in their development when they needed it most. And you've been feeding that hunger with distractions your entire adult life. Work, ambition, relationships that were safe because they never asked too much of you, substances, achievements, the endless, exhausting performance of being someone who has it together. All of it, every single strategy, a sophisticated attempt to fill a space that you have never fully allowed yourself to look at directly. But here's the truth that will unsettle you. That hunger, the person you are emotionally bonded to, they don't satisfy it. They trigger it. And there is an enormous, crucial difference between those two things that most people never stop to understand. When someone triggers your deepest hunger, rather than satisfying it, the experience feels identical to love. It feels identical to connection. It feels like finding something you lost, like recognizing a face in a dream that you've been searching for your entire waking life. But it is not recognition of them. It is recognition of the hunger itself. And this is where it gets dangerous. The subconscious mind is not interested in your happiness. Let me say that again clearly, because it contradicts everything you have ever been told about your own psychology. Your subconscious is not your ally in the pursuit of health or peace or well-being. It is a machine for repetition. It is a system designed to recreate familiar emotional experiences, not because they are good for you, but because they are known. The brain would rather suffer in a familiar way than grow in an unfamiliar one. Read that again and let it sit with the full weight of what it actually means. Every person you have ever been deeply bonded to, every person who has held disproportionate psychological power over you, has done so not because of who they are, but because of who they remind your nervous system of, because of the emotional frequency they broadcast that your body recognizes from somewhere ancient, somewhere early, somewhere that formed before you had words for any of it. Most people don't see this. They look at their patterns, the recurring types they fall for, the familiar dynamics they recreate in relationship after relationship, and they say, "I just have bad luck," or "I always fall for unavailable people," or "I don't know why I keep ending up here." But luck has nothing to do with it. The subconscious is a perfect compass. It points with extraordinary reliability toward exactly the emotional experience it has been trained to recognize as love. And if what it was trained on was inconsistency, you will be drawn to people who are inconsistent. If what it was trained on was having to earn affection, you will hunger most powerfully for people whose affection must be earned. If what it was trained on was loving someone who was never quite available, then availability will feel suspicious, and emotional distance will feel like home. And here is the part that is almost impossible to accept. The person you are bonded to right now, the one in your mind, the one you cannot stop circling, they fit the template. They fit it precisely, not because they are your fate, not because the universe selected them for you, but because your subconscious recognized the emotional signature and said, "There, that one, that's what we know." But here's what makes this even more psychologically complex. It is not just about what was painful in your past. It is equally about what was never resolved, about the needs that were partially met, enough to create hope, not enough to create satisfaction. Because partial fulfillment is the most psychologically devastating condition a human being can experience. It creates a loop, a circuit that cannot close. And a circuit that cannot close will keep running indefinitely, searching desperately for the completion it was promised but never given. Think about the way this person makes you feel. Not the surface feeling, not the warmth or the excitement or the way your body responds. Go deeper. What is the feeling underneath that? Is it urgency? Is it a desperate need to be understood by this specific person? Is it the feeling that if they just fully saw you, if they just completely accepted you, something inside you would finally be able to rest? That feeling, that specific constellation of yearning, that is not about them. That is the echo of an old, unresolved need wearing their face. And this is where the most uncomfortable question emerges. Who else made you feel this way? Who else, earlier, held this specific kind of power over your emotional world? Who else created that same combination of urgency and tenderness and inexplicable, overwhelming need? Because the bond you feel right now, the one that feels so immediate and so real and so present, it did not begin with them. It began long before them. It began in a room, in a moment, in a relationship where a younger version of you learned what love was supposed to feel like. Learned it not from a book, not from a theory, but from lived experience, from the specific emotional weather of the people who first surrounded you. And here is what repression does, what the subconscious does with things that are too painful, too complicated, too loaded to carry consciously. It buries them, not forever, not cleanly, but deeply enough that you stop seeing them as memories and start experiencing them as preferences, as attractions, as the specific gravity that pulls you towards certain people and makes others, no matter how genuinely loving they are, feel somehow wrong, somehow flat, somehow like there is nothing there, even when there is something extraordinary there. The subconscious transforms old wounds into present hungers, and then it goes looking for the person whose presence mirrors the original emotional environment closely enough to feel like coming home. Even if that home was never entirely safe, even if that home was the place you were most hurt, because the nervous system does not distinguish between familiar comfort and familiar pain. It simply recognizes familiar. And familiar feels like truth. Familiar feels like reality. Familiar feels like this person is the only real thing in a world full of shadows. Most people never make it past this realization. They feel the pull, they feel the bond, they feel the ancient cellular recognition of this specific person, and they follow it, or they flee from it, but they never stop to ask the most important question of all. What am I actually recognizing? What is the part of me that this person has touched, that has been untouched for so long, that their touch feels like an electric shock, like revival, like something in me waking up that had given up on being woken? Because until you can answer that question, you will remain at the mercy of the bond. And the bond, let's be absolutely clear, has no interest in your liberation. The bond is a mechanism of repetition. It does not want you to heal, it wants to recreate. And it will do so with extraordinary efficiency, with devastating emotional precision, over and over again, wearing new faces, new names, new circumstances, until you finally stop, sit still, and look at what it is actually showing you. Because it is trying to show you something. Your subconscious, for all its repetitive, mechanical, sometimes destructive compulsions, is not your enemy. It is a messenger you have been refusing to read. You have built a version of yourself that you are willing to show the world. It is carefully constructed, quietly edited, a version that has learned which emotions are acceptable, which needs are appropriate to express, which desires are safe to acknowledge, and which ones must be driven underground, locked away, denied existence until they are so deeply buried that you have genuinely convinced yourself they are not there. But here is what you need to understand about the things you bury. They do not die. They do not dissolve. They do not quietly wait in the dark until you are ready to deal with them. They grow. They grow in direct proportion to how thoroughly you deny them. And when they have grown large enough, when the pressure becomes too great for the architecture of repression to contain, they erupt through the one gap in your defenses that you never thought to guard. Your emotional bonds. The person you cannot get out of your mind right now is not just a person. They are a projection screen. They are the surface onto which your subconscious has been casting everything it cannot say out loud. Every unacknowledged desire, every repressed need, every part of yourself that you decided somewhere along the way was too much, too dark, too complicated, too vulnerable to be allowed to exist in the open. And this is where it gets deeply uncomfortable, because what you love in them, the qualities that drew you in, that kept you there, that make you feel like you cannot breathe properly when you imagine a world without them in it, those qualities are not foreign to you. They are not exotic gifts that only they possess. They are you. The you that you buried. Think about what you admire most in them. Think about the thing they do, the way they are, that makes something in you respond with that specific, aching, desperate recognition. Now ask yourself, honestly, with the kind of courage that most people reserve only for the most extreme moments of their lives, when did you decide that quality was not allowed to exist in you? Because somewhere, at some point, you made that decision. Maybe it was made for you by someone else's reaction to you, by a parent who flinched, by a peer who laughed, by a lover who told you that part of you was too much. Maybe you made it yourself, in a quiet, private moment of self-judgment that you have long since forgotten, but that your subconscious recorded with perfect fidelity. And ever since that moment, you have been carrying that exiled quality in shadow, feeding it through your obsessions, your fantasies, your inability to look away from the people who embody it. Because you cannot lose your own qualities. You can only lose your relationship with them. And what happens when you lose your relationship with a part of yourself, when you drive it underground, is that you begin to experience that quality as belonging to someone outside you. You begin to experience your own internal hunger as attraction to a specific person. You begin to confuse the journey inward with the journey toward them. Most people don't see this. Most people look at the intensity of what they feel and conclude that it must be about the other person, must be about their specific, irreplaceable magic. And yes, there is magic. Yes, they are real. But the ferocity of what you feel, the way this bond reaches down into the oldest parts of you and grips something there, that ferocity is yours. It belongs to you. And this is where the deepest psychological trap is set. Because as long as you believe that what you feel lives in them, as long as you locate the source of this aliveness outside yourself, you will remain dependent. You will remain bound. You will continue to orbit this person, or the memory of this person, or the next person who broadcasts the same emotional frequency, because the thing you are actually searching for never left you. It went underground, and it has been waiting. But here is the part that increases the pressure even further. There is also the matter of what you cannot stand in them, the quality that irritates you, that frustrates you, that sometimes makes you feel a rage disproportionate to the actual offense. Because the things that trigger the most intense emotional reaction in us, the things that other people do that make us feel something far bigger than the situation warrants, those too are shadows. Those too are the parts of yourself you buried, but buried with shame rather than longing. The person who infuriates you most is showing you the part of yourself you are most ashamed to admit exists. And this is why emotional bonds of this depth are so psychologically total, so consuming, so impossible to simply decide to stop having, because they are not just romantic. They are not just attachment. They are mirrors. Living, breathing, infuriatingly accurate mirrors, showing you both the gold you abandoned and the darkness you denied. And you cannot look away, not because you are weak, Not because you are addicted in the conventional sense, but because some part of you, beneath the confusion, beneath the pain, beneath the story you have told yourself about what this all means, some part of you knows that this person is not just a person, knows that this bond is not just a bond, knows that what is happening inside you, however painful, however disorienting, however overwhelming it feels at 2A.m. when the defenses are down and the real feelings surface, is something trying to be completed, something trying to be resolved, something that has been knocking on the door of your consciousness for a very long time, wearing increasingly elaborate disguises, saying over and over, in the only language the subconscious knows, "Look at this. Look at what you've been hiding. Look at who you actually are beneath the person you decided to become." And here is the most confronting truth of all. You already know what it's trying to show you. You've always known. The reason this person affects you this deeply, the reason this bond carries this specific, suffocating weight, is not a mystery your conscious mind cannot access. It is a truth your conscious mind has been actively refusing to access. Because the moment you fully see it, the moment you understand exactly what this bond is built on and what it is asking you to face, the comfortable story you've been telling yourself about who you are, about why you feel what you feel, about what you need and why you need it, that story will collapse, and you will have to decide who you are in the rubble. That is the terror that lives beneath the bond, not the fear of losing them, not the fear of rejection or abandonment, or the pain of the relationship ending. The fear of what you would see about yourself if you looked clearly, the fear of your own depth, the fear that if you pulled back every projection, every defense, every comfortable illusion, you would find something in yourself so large, so hungry, so long denied and so powerfully alive, that you would have no idea what to do with it. And the bond, this invisible, exhausting, inexplicable bond, is the pressure that has been building from that discovery for years. It is not a warning to stop. It is a demand to begin. Here is what nobody tells you about the people who are emotionally bound to you. They are not holding you. You are holding yourself. Every chain you think exists between you and this person, every tie, every bond, every invisible thread of need and longing and recognition, it runs through you. It is anchored in you. It lives in the unexamined interior of your own psychology. And this means something extraordinary, something that sounds simple until you feel the full weight of it. The release is also in you. But this is where the final, most psychologically demanding truth arrives. Because when people hear that, when they hear the release is in you, they immediately misunderstand it. They hear, let go. They hear, stop feeling it. They hear, move on, as if the solution is simply to generate enough willpower to overpower something that lives in the deepest strata of their nervous system. That is not what this means. You cannot think your way out of a subconscious bond. You cannot logic yourself free of an emotional architecture that was built before logic was available to you. You cannot simply decide not to feel what you feel. What you can do, what is actually being asked of you in the face of this overwhelming, consuming, psychologically total bond, is something far more radical. You can see it clearly. Because here is what happens when you bring a subconscious pattern into full, honest, unflinching, conscious awareness. Here is what happens when you stop running from the thing you are feeling and instead sit with it long enough to understand its actual shape. When you ask not, how do I make this stop, but what is this actually made of? When you trace the bond back through your history, through your wounds, through every moment of unmet need and repressed desire and exiled selfhood that contributed to its construction, the pattern loses its automatic grip. Not all at once, not without grief, not without the disorientation of having a familiar story taken away from you, but steadily, structurally, in the way that understanding always, eventually, loosens the control of the thing understood. The subconscious derives its power almost entirely from invisibility, from operating in the dark, from running patterns that your conscious mind has never examined, never named, never followed back to their source. The moment you bring a pattern into the light, the moment you can say, this is what this bond is made of, this is the wound it maps onto, this is the exiled self it represents, this is the original relationship it is trying to replay and resolve. The moment you can say all of that clearly, not as an intellectual exercise but as a felt, embodied truth, the compulsion begins to change. Not disappear, change. So let me ask you one final time, not as a provocation, not as a rhetorical gesture, but as the most genuinely important question you will ever allow yourself to sit with. Who were you before you decided that who you are was not enough to be? Because that person, the one you buried, the one the bond has been pointing toward all along, the one who has been knocking on the inside of every obsession, every inexplicable pull, every 3M, sleepless recognition that something in you is unfinished and unfed and achingly, desperately alive. That person is still here. They have always been here. They are the one who has been bound, not to another person, but to the truth of what you are. And the chain between you and that truth is not someone else's to break. It is yours. And you already know how.